Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to this Engaging the Mind program. My name is Susan Lynch. I am the Associate Director of Lifetime Learning at the University of Virginia's Office of Engagement. I'm so pleased that you are joining us this afternoon for the program entitled Bending the Arc, Land and Food Justice in Virginia. Before we start the program, I want to bring a few things to your attention. We received many questions in advance of the program that we have shared with the speakers. If you have a question during the presentation, you may enter it in the webinar Q&A at the bottom of the screen. You'll find resources in the webinar chat box below. Please also note this program is being recorded and will be posted in Lifetime Learning's podcast library in about a week or two. Now on to our program. I will introduce our moderator and he will introduce the rest of our panelists. Paul Friedman is the director of the Environmental Thought and Practice major and associate professor in the Department of Politics in the College and Graduate School of Arts and Sciences at the University of Virginia. He's a member of the university's Committee on Sustainability and the UVA Sustainable Food Collaborative, and previously served on the board of Cultivate Charlottesville. Friedman teaches courses on media, elections, and environmental politics, and is gearing up to teach a summer course on the politics of food at UVA's Morven Sustainability Lab. So thank you again for joining us for this Lifetime Learning program. Thank you to Professor Friedman for moderating. Professor, I invite you to start the presentation.
Thank you so much, Susan, and I want to thank everybody at Lifetime Learning. I also want to thank all of you today for joining us this afternoon to hear about some of the important work that's going on here in the Commonwealth and at the University of Virginia. I'm going to introduce each of our panelists. I'll ask them to turn on their cameras now, and then I will invite each panelist to share a bit of her or his work. We'll talk for a while amongst ourselves, and then we will turn to questions. I want to start with Ebony Alexander. Ebony Alexander is Executive Director of the Black Family Land Trust, one of the only conservation land trusts dedicated to the preservation and protection of African American and other historically underserved landowners' land assets. Black Family Land Trust programs are designed to engage landowners about conservation, natural resources, and environmental protection. Under Ebony's leadership, the Black Family Land Trust has expanded from North Carolina to South Carolina and Virginia with projects in Alabama, Mississippi, and Vermont. The trust has helped countless families retain their land assets for future generations. In 2020, Ebony received the Gerald P. McCarthy Award for Leadership in Environmental Conflict Resolution. And in 2023, she was awarded the Kingsbury Brown Award from the National Land Trust Alliance. Ebony is passionate in her belief that land is a tangible asset with economic, human, and spiritual value, which connects African Americans with their rich history in the Americas. A native of Maryland, Ebony lives in Southside Virginia and can trace her paternal family back 7 generations. Michael Carter Jr. is an 11th generation farmer and the 5th generation to farm on Carter Farms, his family's century farm in Orange County, Virginia. Michael gives workshops on how to grow and market ethnic vegetables and has worked in Ghana, Kenya, and Israel as an agronomist and organic agricultural consultant. Through his educational, cultural, and policy work, Michael Carter shares the contributions of Africans and African Americans to agriculture worldwide and trains students, educators, and professionals in African cultural understanding, empathy, and implicit bias recognition. This work includes a course entitled Africulture, the American Roots of U.S. Agriculture, which Michael has offered here at the University of Virginia twice, including this past semester, the semester that is currently ending. This course, co-taught with Professor Lisa Shutt of the Department of African and African American Studies, has been made possible with support from the Jefferson Trust. Tom McDougall is the founder and CEO of 4P Foods, a public benefit corporation food hub network based in the Mid-Atlantic, working with over 200 small farmers, ranchers, and food producers. As an advocate for equitable and regenerative food systems, Tom is a current fellow with the Aspen Institute's Food Leaders Fellowship Program and a board member of several food system organizations. In 2019, he helped co-found the Eastern Food Hub Collaborative, a network of mission-aligned food hubs up and down the Eastern Seaboard, for the purpose of regional collaboration and a more cohesive, decentralized food supply chain. He also assisted with the creation of the Mid-Atlantic Food Resilience and Access Coalition in the early days of the COVID pandemic, which exists to connect local farmers with food access organizations. Tom is an entrepreneur and activist advocating for long-term policy change needed to shift support towards local and regional food systems for the sake of our farms, our communities, and our planet. Finally, Tanya Denklikov is director of the UVA Institute for Engagement and Negotiation, where she has worked as a public policy mediator and facilitator for 27 years. A longtime advocate for sustainable food systems, she taught food systems planning at UVA for 8 years, and now is the chair of the UVA Sustainable Food Collaborative, about whose work we will hear shortly. Tanya's authored 2 books, Reclaiming Our Food, How the Grassroots Movement is Changing the Way We Eat, which I'm looking at this very moment on my bookshelf. And then a book which was just released, The Backyard Homestead Guide to Growing Organic Food. This is a super panel. I want to thank all of the panelists for making time today. And Ebony, I want to turn things over to you to talk a bit about your work here.
Thank you, and good afternoon, all. I am Ebony Alexander, and I am with the Black Family Land Trust. And as was stated, the BFLT is a niche land trust working primarily with African Americans, but we believe that land is an asset and it should be a performing asset for current and future generations. We work primarily one-on-one with our landowners to make sure that they get the one-to-one technical assistance that they need. We believe that land should be made human. If you make your land human, you will treat it differently. It's like your children, I always say. They get on your nerves, but you never get rid of them. So if you own land, which is a finite commodity, you should look at it a little bit differently and make sure that that land, whether it's generational land, ancestral land, or any other land that your family has owned, make sure that you treat it as a human asset, not just as dirt. The other thing that we do at the BFLT is to make sure that people understand the historical significance of land ownership in America. This country was founded by men, white men, who owned land. African Americans, Native Americans, and other ethnic groups did not participate in the founding. So that tells you something else about the value of land and why land is important. It is a finite commodity. To that end, we have a program called the African American Land Ethic. The land ethic is designed to really for the next generation, to help them understand and appreciate the contributions that African Americans have made to the agricultural community throughout the country. We have also worked very carefully to make sure that people understand the historic significance of not only the land ownership, but what else has been contributed to land ownership. I'm sorry, my timer went off too early. To make sure that people understand the value and the contributions that African Americans have made. The land ethic starts at the Middle Passage and goes through today, and it looks at the most important period, which is post-slavery, during that great migration when we started to see people leave the South and move to other parts of the country. And that will lead us to where we are now. We have lots of land. Well, our land loss issue in the African American community really starts around the 1920s. 1920s was the height of African American land ownership, where we own somewhere between 12 and 15 million acres of land, depending upon whose numbers you look at. By 1997, we had lost 97% of that land. Today, African Americans own a little less than 2 million acres of land, agricultural land throughout the country. If we were to look specifically at Virginia, in the period between 1982 and 1997, we lost 58% of the land assets for African Americans there. One of the highest causes of land loss in the African American community is heirs property. And heirs property is something that the BFLT has been working on since our inception. And I'll just add, we're 20 years old this year. So heirs property is what they call tenancy in common. And it really began with the Great Migration. As people left the South, they left their land. They left for numerous reasons. But when they left, they were still owners of that land. So what is tenancy in common? It simply means that you don't have clear title to the land. The deed to the land is usually in the name of someone who's deceased 1, 2, 3 generations ago. Ownership follows the bloodline, and it is very difficult to clear up once you get past that second generation. In Virginia, it costs somewhere between $30,000 and $50,000 to clear up a simple heirs property situation. When I say it follows the bloodline, that means you might start with your grandfather or your great-grandfather, and everybody in that bloodline has ownership rights, equal ownership rights to that property. What happens is that means that you can't use the land as a performing asset. You can't mortgage the land. You can't fully benefit from USDA and other state programs, whether they're agricultural or forestry programs. You can't mortgage the property at all. That means that you can't take any kind of debt out on the land. And most importantly, if you're involved in some agricultural enterprise, it means that you're self-financing because you can't use the land as collateral, as I said. So in Virginia in 2020, we were successful in getting the uniform petition for heirs property passed. Governor Northam signed it into law. And what that did was give Virginians a different level of protection to prevent partition sales. A partition sale, simply put, is when some member of the family, regardless of the fractional interest that they own, is able to force a sale, to say, I want you to pay me for what I own. There was no way to set a price for that. There was no way to make that process fair. You've all heard or seen land auction on courthouse steps. That was what would happen in a petition sale. With uniform petition, while it's not a panacea, it does not give you unlimited rights. It does give families 5 basic protections that they did not have previous to the law. And those basic protections are really quite simple. One, it provides you with a fair market appraisal. If someone says, I want to be bought out, the court is going to order an independent appraiser to appraise that land. So that means that you're not going to have someone who says, oh, you've got 100 acres of land and it's only worth $1,000. You know now that you're going to get a fair market. 2, it gives first right of refusal to anyone except for the person who brought the petition sale to say what they want to do. If the person who bought the sale still insists, then the court says that it can be petitioned in kind and force a petition, even though people don't want it. That person who brought the suit cannot be able to participate. They'll still have ownership, but they can't force the sale. The most important part for me, for our landowners is that the court gives special consideration for ancestral or historical land. And why is that important? That's important because for many African Americans and many people who have heirs property, there is a connection to that land. Their families have lived on that land for multiple generations. Even if the family is not actively engaged in agriculture right now, one of the things that may have happened is you come back every year or every other year for a family reunion, or you have burial grounds. You bring people back for their final resting place. That gives you special consideration in a partition. And finally, if it must be partitioned, then in fact you have to have a licensed realtor handle that sale, meaning that you're going to get fair market value for the property, not pennies on the dollar. And that has been one of the challenges of heirs property. Heirs property does not know race, gender, ethnicity, or geography. Heirs property is simply put as you die without a will, you die intestate. So if you have 100 acres of land in Augusta County and you die without a will, you create heirs property. If you have a $100,000 condo on Broad Street in Richmond and you die without a will, you've created heirs property. And the best way to avoid that is to create a will. So we work with all of our landowners. That's probably the second or third question we ask them. Do you have a will? And if not, we work with them to help them get a will. The other thing that I'll say about heirs property and who we are is that 70% of all farms in this country are small acreage or family farms. They receive less than 30% of resources from USDA. That means that our small acreage farmers are carrying our agriculture for our communities, our local communities, but they're not getting the benefit from USDA. To that end, we are working to create an office of small farms within USDA. It was a recommendation from the Equity Commission, the characteristics of a small farmer, and I hope most of you who are listening can resonate with this, are that they're 60 to 65 years of age or older. They work 2 jobs, a public job as well as their agricultural enterprise. They have limited access to technology, and I'm not talking about broadband. I'm talking about precision ag, climate smart ag, all of the soil health that is going on. They have equipment that is 30 or 40 years of age, and they tend to make less than $25,000 a year from their enterprise. So our work is to help keep small farms, to keep family farms as family farms, and to make sure that our communities have full access to healthy, locally grown food, and to retain ownership within our communities, not through people who live outside of our communities.
Terrific. Ebony, thank you so much. And that is a perfect transition to Michael Carter Jr. and your work at Carter Farms.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Dr. Freeman. I'm Michael Carter Jr., a small farmer, 5th generation small farmer at Carter Farms, as well as running a nonprofit called Africulture. Africulture teaches or shares the principles, practices, plans, and people of African descent that contribute to agriculture. Much like Ebony, we do a lot to service our immediate community of African Americans and African American farmers and growers and African American landowners. My work complements Ebony's work quite a bit in terms of adding value to individuals who may not see the value of the land and really the value of the occupation of an agriculturalist or a farmer. Because of the stigma of slavery, chattel slavery in the United States and the Caribbean and South America, the idea of working in the fields is very stigmatized. And with that stigma, we lose a lot of value in terms of young people, older people, retired people getting back into agriculture because of their predisposed stigmas. So we work a lot to readdress those stigmas, re-educate individuals around that, and really help younger people. When I would say younger people, I say anybody under 55. As Ebony had stressed, the farmer, the average farmer in Virginia is approximately 59 years old. The average Black farmer is 63. So I try to get them before they get to the average age and work toward helping them to see the value of both the land as well as how to grow niche products. At Carter Farms, we focus mainly on growing African crops. Those African crops we do about maybe 30 to 60 different varieties of various crops for educational purposes, research purposes, and now because of the newest phenomenon related to climate smart practices for climate smart purposes as well, environmental purposes. Many of these crops are highly resistant to disease, pest pressures, and can survive in what we know as droughts, where 2, 3, 4 weeks without rain. Most European, Mediterranean crops can't really do as well. The African crops we grow thrive in that environment. We work with various doctors, medical people, and researchers to establish a program that we're referring to as Eating for Your Ethnic Type. The idea is that every ethnicity has a food that fits their genetic biome and ultimately makes them as healthy as possible. However, what we eat in America in our standard American diet is usually foods based out of Europe and the Mediterranean. And these crops generally are not heat tolerant without some level of hybridization or genetic modification to make them heat tolerant, or just don't do well and have to be grown in very controlled environments in which you don't get the true nutritional value of those crops. So we get spinach or lettuce in the wintertime, or I'm sorry, in the summertime, May, June, July, August. That's not a natural cycle of growth. If you ever grown a spinach plant, right about now, they're doing what's called bolting, where they're starting to produce seeds because the heat from the ground is causing stress to the roots, which is causing stress to the leaves, and they realize they're not going to be able to survive as the temperatures get warmer, and they release seed to prepare for the next generation. And at this point, the spinach becomes bitter and is not nutritionally viable anymore for humans. So we try to grow crops that won't bolt in the summertime, but actually thrive in the summertime. And as we look at things like global warming and climate change, what we notice is temperatures are increasing, they're not decreasing. So we need to have plants that are much more tolerant to the heat than they are to the cold. We also serve as we teach a class at University of Virginia, agriculture. We work with young people to familiarize themselves first and foremost with the realities of agriculture in Virginia, Black farmers in Virginia, small farmers in Virginia, and some of their historical realities, as well as opportunities to address some of the issues that we address in class, to create solutions, strategies around how to solve some of these endemic and situations that we find ourselves in season after season, year after year, decade after decade, where we can now start to create and add new minds to this puzzle to figure out, how do we solve this? How do we create it so that I can ultimately focus just on farming? I really want them to put me out of a job. And that's the challenge, is because, the longer I'm doing the work that I'm doing, I cannot focus on growing crops that I'm growing. I cannot focus on just being a great farmer. I have to focus on making sure I teach and educate individuals, because they generally don't understand the realities of a lot of these small farmers, indigenous farmers, African-American farmers, other minoritized farmers. The reality in Virginia is that Black farmers are an endangered species. And as an endangered species, it's my job to try to create the environment that allows them to continue to thrive and grow. Right now, I'm not doing a great job. In Ebony had mentioned earlier, the number of land that was held in the state of Virginia, there are approximately 52,000 Black farmers in 1925. 52,150. As of the last census, we're down to approximately 1,024 Black farmers. So a 98% decrease within the last 100 years. And unfortunately, the numbers aren't increasing. The last census prior to the 2022 census was 2017, which we had approximately 1,333 farmers. So we lost approximately 200 farmers, which is about 20% of the farmers. The average decline of farmers in the state of Virginia was 10%. The Black farmers were 20%. So we're losing farmers from a local level, but then we're losing them exponentially when we look at African American farmers. And as a fifth generation farmer, I want to make sure that my sons can be a sixth generation farmer, and that they have peers that are African American and sixth generation farmers, or third generation farmers, or fourth generation farmers. So we help our young people and our older people understand the value of the occupation of holding the land, what they can do, what they've done historically, and what opportunities are available for them in the future. As young people, and I was a young person, and I think most of you all may have been young at one time, you recall when you were 16, 17, 18 years old, and just about to start in the workforce. Many times you didn't care what you did as long as you got paid. And what you would hear from many farmers when I was coming up especially was, we don't make any money. Well, that's the worst marketing campaign ever for a teenager. If you want them to get into your occupation, is tell them you don't make any money. And it's usually not true. And if it is true, it's because we haven't utilized our niche market skills and our marketing skills and even our social media skills to figure out how to make this more attractive and to grow your business and your farm to be successful. So these are some of the things that we do at Agriculture and Carter Farms. We appreciate the opportunity to share with you all and look forward to sharing with you all later on in the presentation.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Michael. And I want to thank you also for your work in the core sphere at UVA in environmental thought and practice. I hope you stick around because the students love this class. I think you've done a great job of setting up the situation, the decline of the dramatic decline in the number of Black farmers nationally and here, especially in the Commonwealth of Virginia. So Tanya, I'm hoping that you can tell us a little bit about the work of the Sustainable Food Collaborative at the university, and then with Tom, talk about this, the collaborative effort that we're all involved in to make some progress in changing the way we do business here in terms of food purchases.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. It's really great to be here with all of you, and then all of the people who are listening, and hopefully will have questions for us. So I'm Tanya. I'm one of the co-founders, along with Paul, of the Sustainable Food Collaborative at the University of Virginia, which was formed in 2015. What we did, and we were asked to do, was we created the Sustainable Food Goals for UVA as part of its larger sustainability plan. And so you'll see here on the screen the 5-pronged set of goals that are formalized in what we call the Sustainable Food Action Plan. The first one, which we'll dive into briefly, is about what Michael was talking about, the need for, and Paul, previewed, is what can a university do to address the kind of situation that Ebony described, Michael described, where we have this legacy of harm that has happened over, especially the last century, with the loss of land, the loss of people of color who are farmers, our African American farmers in particular. And what do we do about it? So the first one is really about increasing the percentage of sustainable food on grounds. And I'll dive into that, as I said, in just a moment. The second one is about reducing food waste. The third is really trying to address food equity and food security at the university. The fourth is raising awareness and ultimately trying to change behaviors and choices. And the fifth one is really saying that we can't do this without our community partners, that we have to do this in arm in arm with community partners. And so on the first goal is, what does it mean to bend really the power of our food purse? A pretty radical idea. How do we bend the power of our food purse, which is about $10 to $12 million a year at UVA, to address the legacy issues discussed by Ebony and Michael? Specifically, how do we use our food procurement dollars to support BIPOC farmers in Virginia? And that's what I think Tom is going to talk about in just a moment. And what I want to say is that This takes a lot of time and a lot of willing and equally passionate partners. It takes a willing partner within UVA, and that had to be UVA Dine, which is Aramark, as one of our earliest partners. And I think which may surprise a number of people on this webinar, that they were just as excited. They were eager, excited, visionary. Nothing could have happened without them as the first partner in this effort. And I want to say that UVA is now one of Aramark's 2 national pilots to intentionally source food from BIPOC farmers. And of those 2 pilots, we're the only university in the country doing this. So it is we're taking still baby steps, as Tom will tell you, but they're very important baby steps. And second, we couldn't be doing this without 4P Foods, our regional small farm products distributor, and founded by Tom, who's about to talk, and who is as passionate a person as a past person can be about bending the arc and finding ways to support BIPOC farmers. And last, we would not be successful without the amazing Michael Carter Jr., who just spoke, who is both an encyclopedia of information and history, as well as a master networker who has been able to work with the farmers themselves to help them understand the ups and downs and ins and outs of joining an institutional supply chain, which, believe me, is not necessarily an attractive prospect. So there's all kinds of reasons why they might not want to join an institutional supply chain. One of them is the distrust of these institutions and the role that UVA has played in a number of issues through the past, including eugenics. So all of these partners have been willing to step into a brand new territory, willing to work with a huge ship, which is UVA, that changes its course very, very slowly. And they've all been willing to work at the pace of trust and willing to take risks and see where things lead. And for that, we're most grateful. So with that, I will turn it over to Paul and Tom.
Yeah, thanks, Tanya, and thanks for putting this into the context of our work at the Sustainable Food Collaborative. Tom, over to you to talk more about this initiative and the work that really we're just getting off the ground.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Friedman, and everybody for participating not only in this panel, but importantly for the work we're doing on the ground. For some context, I suppose for the audience, so 4P Foods is a 10-year-old food distributor, or more accurately, a food hub network. And we are a mission-driven company whose mission is really 2 parts. Part 1, how do we build a new system that can allow small and mid-sized farmers to not just survive, but really truly thrive? And begin to reverse some of the trends that Michael is highlighting in terms of the lack of economic viability of farms, part 1. And part 2, as we do that work, how do we also ensure that the folks that we're serving is inclusive and equitable? How does everybody, regardless of income, regardless of race or zip code or age, have true and dignified and culturally appropriate access to the kind of food that these producers are producing? Which is the thing that's gotten me out of bed for the last 10 years. It is my life's work, and it looks good on a PowerPoint. It is very hard within the current confines of our global economic system and the way that capitalism measures success on a P&L to make that look good on a P&L. Because how do we at once pay farmers what he or she or they deserve for producing not only really good, nutrient-dense, culturally relevant food for their communities, but also doing things like sequestering carbon out of the atmosphere and storing it and building soil and increasing ecosystem biodiversity and biomass and correspondingly climate resiliency, storing and retaining water, providing rural economic opportunity, all of these things that we desperately need as we move towards a healing culture that it is often hard to pay those farmers for. So let's pay those farmers the right price for all those things and then serve everybody. Especially and including those in marginalized and under-resourced communities at a price point that works for them, which 10 times out of 10 is going to be a price point that's lower than what we just paid the farmer. And this price gap, this sort of delta between what farmers deserve and what everyone can afford, is what some people articulate as food deserts or food apartheid. And we would point to that as the manifestation of a poorly designed system over the last 400 years that's been built upon extraction and oppression that creates a false dichotomy between cheap food from the industrial system that is artificially cheap because it's been produced in ways that extract from Mother Nature and then oppress human beings oftentimes on land that was originally stolen, with the other kind of food that we're talking about from small farms, from local farms that is a higher price point, but it's not actually higher. So we'll get into that because that sort of theory of change is a big part of what we're doing here in partnership with Michael Carter Jr. and his farmer ecosystem in UVA. So Tanya, if you could hit next slide. What we do is, as a food hub, we buy food from about 200 small farmers in the region. It's produce, it's meat, it's dairy, it's value-added producers, folks producing hot sauce and chutney and salsa and so on. We work closely with our institutional buyers and partners and customers like UVA to get commitments for what they might buy in the upcoming semester or throughout the season. We then bring that to our growers who will plant, grow, harvest, process for us the thing that our institutional clients want and need, and then track closely the impact that that's having, which in many institutional cases helps them to justify leaning in further and further to this type of programmatic development, because ultimately it's not about the food, it's about the supply chain, it's about using institutional power to change the system, which is what we embarked upon the last few years, in part through this sort of triangulation of partners around this call, which Tanya, next slide, if you don't mind for me, began with UVA recognizing that there is a role for institutions to play in advocating for, and not just advocating, but really starting to walk the talk on using that power to enable BIPOC producers in particular to be part of these supply chains if they want to be. The challenge, one of the many challenges, however, for anyone that wants a quick little tutorial on how institutional procurement works, you have these large institutions like Aramark who will put out RFPs, requests for proposals, to big food service providers. Usually it's an Aramark or a Compass or a Sodexo. Those are what's known as the big three. There's a handful of big institutions that do what's called self-op or self-operated, but by and large, it goes out to bid. These food service providers then bid based on service, based on price. Price is a big one. And based on the other things that they could do that's relevant to earning the business. And then those contracts are awarded, and they're long-term, fairly large contracts, 7 years, 10 years, tens of millions of dollars. And a big driver of that, again, is price, because ultimately these are often cases public institutions. They're beholden to their stakeholders. So there becomes this tension here where you have a well-meaning institution, faculty, leadership, et cetera, that want to use the purchasing power to buy from small farms. And then you'll have an Aramark or a Sodexo or a Compass. In this case, our wonderful partner that deserves all of the credit is Aramark, wanting to do that, but they're beholden to hitting the certain price point per meal. But then they also want to buy from folks like Ralph Morton, who's on the screen, one of our Black and veteran farmers here in the Piedmont region of Virginia, whose regeneratively produced beef has a higher price point than Cisco's beef, for example, or US Foods beef. So how do we square that circle? And that's where the leadership of UVA and the leadership of Aramark and the coordination and leadership of Michael Carter Jr. got us going down this track where the Sustainable Food Collaborative provided a grant to 4P Foods, Africulture, and these farmers to basically cover the price difference and help provide technical assistance and micro grants to these farms to get scaled up to be ready to sell into the supply chain and to cover the price gap. So before beginning this, 4P Foods was working with about a dozen BIPOC producers. We're now over 24 producers. We were at, previous to this program, around $100 and something thousand in annual sales from BIPOC producers. We're now well over $500,000 and looking to double that again this year. And all of that is a byproduct of where we started with the Sustainable Food Collaborative. And it kind of began with a field trip that Michael connected us with Ralph and a handful of other producers, and we got UVA chefs and faculty and staff onto a bus, and we went out and we heard from these different farms and their different stories about what the challenges were, who were able to hear from the chefs about what their challenges and opportunities were, and in the subsequent years have done wonderful work around menu programming, special events, and we're looking to scale up again, which on the next slide, Tanya, shows some good numbers as a percentage, but there are much greater numbers to be had because the baseline here is we're so low. For example, when we began, there were a total of 2 Black farmers in the state of Virginia that had good agricultural practices certification. It's called GAP certification. We're now up to 4, is it, Michael? So one could say it's a 100% increase or a 50% increase if we're up to 3, but we've got a lot of work to do.
3.5.
And 3.5, yeah, a few in the pipeline, right? So statistics can tell different kinds of stories, and what's exciting to me, at least, and where I have gratitude for UVA and Michael and others, is that the spend that UVA has spent with these producers is up from where it was, and that is up and to the right, which is the right direction. But more importantly, what it's enabled is, like I said, a 5-fold increase from these producers for our other customer base, which Paul, or Tanya, if you could hit the next slide here and final slide, what it's enabled us to do is bring on more and more Black farmers who have, like, Pine Knot Farms, the only certified Black organic farm in North Carolina, whose sweet potatoes are moving to and through different programs in Washington, D.C. Farmer D is awesome. He's really adopted the specialty crop marketing. He's got some of the only and certainly the best black garlic you will ever have in the Commonwealth of Virginia. So any specialty chefs out there, take a look for black garlic. It's awesome. Mr. Moore, another one down in North Carolina who is expanding, is now part of our ecosystem. So really the singular leadership of UVA and Aramark in this program has begun to have this ripple effect where we're delivering to food banks, food pantries, school systems for these farmers. And while we have a long way to go, I think it is worth celebrating in terms of at least the bones of the pilot that we've developed. So thanks again for letting me be part of it.
Perfect. Tom, thank you so much for walking us through this. I'll say from my perspective, I want to echo what you and Tanya have said about and Michael have said about the important early work of folks at Aramark, and then here UVA Dine, which is Aramark at the University of Virginia, in really getting this all started. I'll say one of the things that UVA Dine does that I think is extremely valuable is a Meet the Farmer program where they'll actually bring farmers in or talk about some of the small farmers from whom they're sourcing some of the foods. From the perspective of our students, I can tell you, most students, most of the time, don't think a lot about food, right? They don't think about where it comes from. They're not like the people on this panel or the people tuning in today. But the more that we share these stories, the more that we put this into context, the more that Michael and Lisa teach their class, the more people, I think, begin to appreciate the history here, the importance of exactly these sorts of efforts. I do want to turn things over to questions in just a moment, but Michael, as Tanya said, this program doesn't work without you. It doesn't happen without you. So you've provided the context for this a little earlier. Do you want to add to what Tom has said about how the program works, how it's playing out, some of the technical assistance that has been part of this?
Yes. Yeah, it doesn't work without us working together. And one thing I can say is that we started having these conversations late 2020, early 2021. And I'm not sure if anybody's in a dating pool right now, but if this is bad as the dating pool when we started. There was a lot of swiping left, not a lot of swiping right. And we had, some meetings, some no-shows, some disappointments in terms of expectations. It was really a troubled first beginning. I had a lot of doubts. Tom had a lot of doubts. Tom and I together had even more doubts. And I'm sure UVA may have had some doubts. And Aramark definitely had some doubts. But I think at the end of the day, everybody understood what we needed to have done, what was the right thing to do. Not necessarily was the most profitable, not what's going to make the balance sheet look the best, but what was the right thing to do. And we stuck to that and stayed to doing the right thing. And once we started getting the ball rolling, having more ample conversations, asking the tough questions first, figuring out the answers to those tough questions, and then moving forward, but not sweeping anything under the rug. And I'm a really good at identifying the elephant in the room. I can definitely point to the elephant or the 600-pound gorilla, and we're going to have to talk about him first before we move forward. And then I've discovered I'm a pretty good elephant trainer. So what I do with elephants, once I identify them, is get them to walk. And with UVA, as Tanya said, it's a large enterprise. Aramark's a large enterprise, and they move slow. Elephants move very slow. But what they do is if you just take one step to the right and start moving forward, it creates a whole nother lane and pathway. And as a farmer, we appreciate the elephant dung. So all the mistakes that happen, all of the crap that we had to go through, we can learn from and grow. So there's a whole bunch of dung beetles behind that elephant that's making sure that it's cultivated, those mistakes are cultivated into something for the greater good of those that's going to follow us behind. And lastly, I would say the individuals who write those RFPs are so critical. They could change so much of this just by adding in their RFP. They want to source from these farmers. They want to source this percentage. Whoever gets the bid is going to have to meet that standard. And that takes the pressure off of us being so innovative in terms of Aramark accepting the challenge and making it the standard. And if you make it the standard, we all benefit. All your farmers benefit, UVA benefits, your staff benefits, and those institutions who get the bid benefit as well.
Terrific. Thank you so much, all of you, for talking about this. I want to turn to some questions from our audience, and we've heard about the challenges that are so pressing for Black farmers, some of which, of course, are challenges faced by small farmers more generally. Tanya, we've got a question from Meg about Native American farmers, and I know that you've been involved in conversations with Indigenous communities, but also farmers. So I want to give Tanya you first, and then open things up to others to talk about that piece of it.
Well, I think, Meg, thank you for asking this question. It's a really important question. As Tom said, we are all on land that was stolen, and I can't even begin to describe, like, how do we talk about that harm? That I don't even have words for it. Certainly, I'm involved in work through the Institute for Engagement and Negotiation with different federally recognized tribes here in Virginia. I think, I'm going to be really candid, is we have to start somewhere with this issue, with the Sustainable Food Collaborative. And we said, we believe the place for us to start is with our African American farmers. And there's a number of reasons why we chose that. Is we have people like Michael Carter Jr., who have the networks and have the experience and the knowledge. We don't yet have that kind of network with Native American farmers. I do know people who are working on issues of native seed saving and who are leading efforts in the Native community. And we have farmers who are both Native and African American, and so who bring all of that history to the table. But we said we need to start somewhere, and we have to be focused in our efforts. And we said, this is where we're going to start, because this is where it's the clearest path. It has really clear legacies of harm, as we have said, in terms of the loss of land, in terms of the loss of Black American farmers. And it was a place I would love for us to expand. And we need to. So thank you for asking that, Meg.
Tom or Michael, anything to add on that?
Yes, and we do work with our Native American farmers. Ralph Morton, who was on the screen, is also a Native American. And it creates some level of political or social discussion that needs to be had. Many African American communities, a lot of us say we have Indian in our family. But unfortunately, because of the Dawes Act, a lot of us wasn't included in those registers. And we work with the Nottoway Nation, at least members of the Nottoway Nation, who don't always look as what we consider to be a Native American, but they look and pass as Black or African American. But they are part of those nations, and they are actually part in this program, either on the outskirts or potentially on the verge of purchasing from them in the next couple of seasons. So we are working with them. We're not exclusionary at all when it comes to that. We work with Amy Rose Fall out of Fluvanna, who is a Virginia Free Farm, who's indigenous person who does a lot of work with indigenous farmers, nations, et cetera. And it's a matter of building that trust again, even from that standpoint, between the indigenous farming network, or creating an indigenous farming network, and the broader farming network as well.
Michael, we've got a few different questions that seem to want like specifics. Can you tell us more about particular crops that you grow and that you shared with some of the chefs at UVA?
Okay. We grow a lot of African crops, and I would take up the next all the remaining time if I went to every crop. But some of the ones, amaranth, which is a form, or callaloo, which is a form of amaranth, Nigerian spinach, which is a very tall plant, leafy green that's in the Celosia family, taro or cocoyam, which we know today as elephant ear. We know okra or gumbo, as would be called in Senegal, sweet potato leaves. As what we focus more on the leaves than the potato, but we have farmers that do potato, but we also grow the leaves. Roselle, or what do you call that? Roselle hibiscus. So the leaves utilized called sour in Sierra Leone and some parts of West Africa. And I believe our chefs utilize Nigerian spinach from my farm, sour from a farm in Maryland, for those dishes, as well as we did an Edna Lewis Day, which we utilized some of those dishes of the Edna Lewis dinner. And we're really working with but the chefs to incorporate these dishes into the meal plans for students, where they don't have to be cooked traditionally as we would do it in their home place, but make it so it's palatable for a 21-year-old who's trying to get off their addiction to tater tots. Yeah. Trying to move away from real food, from some of the more processed foods and some of these real foods where it's palatable, but then also can be highlighted from the nutritional value as well. A lot of these plants have a very high level of micronutrients, which usually our bodies need to be a lot more healthier, as well as they draw up a lot more nutrients from the soil. So they play a significant role, and I appreciate UVA chefs for being brave enough to create some dynamic and tasty meals with them.
Yeah. I should note, the University of Virginia has a relatively new teaching kitchen. It's in the Student Health and Wellness building. And Michael, you've done several classes and events there. You made some red stew and took the students through that Ghanaian dish. And it was just so exciting to see the students, some of whom had never had this before, but some of whom were, had family from Ghana and were familiar with it. And I don't know, it's just sort of a game changer to actually get students together in a teaching kitchen and really work through it and have them do the chopping and the cooking, and then of course the eating. All right, I think we have time for one more question. Boy, there are a lot of great ones, and I want to thank our colleagues in Lifetime Learning who are doing their best to answer some of these in real time. Oh, Professor Schutt has a question for Ebony Alexander. How does the BFLT identify farmers and conduct outreach when engaging landowners about resources? So how does that work, Ebony?
We do traditional outreach through sitting on panels, a lot of referrals. USDA refers a lot of clients to us. Extension at our land grant institutions also refer people to us. And then we have another network that we work with nationally that refers families to us. It's always a call. We don't turn anyone away. The only criteria that we have for a family is that the family wants to retain the land, and they want to retain the land as a performing asset for that family. So if it's heirs property, if you want to clear the title to sell it, then we can't work with you. But if it's heirs property and you want to retain it to work, say, with Michael or someone else, then we certainly will help you. If it is connecting you to legal services, again, to retain and make that land a performing asset, we work with you there. We do have a pro bono legal services agreement with the state bar to help resolve heirs property.
Terrific. Thank you. Thank you, Ebony, for that. We are going to wrap things up in just a moment, but I want to give each of the panelists an opportunity just to share some concluding thoughts or next steps. I do want to remind everyone that there are links available in the chat that you can certainly copy and paste and visit. These links will be available. I suspect there will be Lifetime Learning will send out some follow-up material, but there really is so much going on. It's a really exciting time here in Virginia and here at UVA to be working around these issues. So let's do a quick round. Tom, why don't we start with you? Any concluding thoughts? Just very briefly.
Sure. To echo what Michael had said earlier, there's a whole lot of power that sits in the office that designs procurement contracts. As we move increasingly towards a world where values-based procurement becomes a thing and institutions use their purchasing power to mandate this type of supply web as an alternative to an extractive supply chain, I think we'll really be able to move the needle here. So a lot of individual power, and as Michael said as well, it's going to move at the speed of trust. So being in it for the long game, we're glad to be part of it. So thank you again.
Terrific. Thank you. Ebony, any last words?
Yes, I remind you that without land, we have no food. So we must preserve the agricultural land that we have now.
Thank you. Tanya.
Universities are driven by student demand, and that also includes their parents and alumni. And so the pressure from those groups can make a big difference. I know that there was a question about the whether this could become a national, whether it would expand beyond. And I think Aramark, we'll see whether it happens, but the regional representative has shared that they do see this as more than a one-off. They are working to make it part of how they approach purchasing and procurement nationally. But again, it'll take a long time, patience and perseverance.
Thank you, Tanya. Michael, last word.
Vote with your fork. Farmers need your votes, and you vote with your fork and your dollar. So we want to make sure when you leave here that you're looking for local farmers. If you're going into the summertime season and the farmers market season, look for those farmers at the farmers markets. Go to the Virginia Black Farmer Directory. You can find Black farmers there listed wherever you are in the state. And if you can't get to them, if you can't reach them via whatever, go to their farm. But definitely vote with your fork, purchase from them, buy from them, procure from them as much as possible.
Fantastic. Thank you. Vote with your fork, vote with your dollars. As a political scientist, I'm just going to throw in vote with your votes. I want to thank all of you for participating. I want to thank the audience. I want to thank Lifetime Learning. And Susan, back to you.
Thank you so much to this amazing panel of experts. This was really an important look at land ownership issues in the Commonwealth and the collaborative efforts to expand the markets available to farmers of color. Often we talk about the issues, but here we talk about the issues and have the folks that are actually doing the work. So this was an amazing conversation this afternoon, and I really appreciate your time today. So thank you to each of you for sharing your time and expertise this afternoon with UVA's alumni, friends, and families. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. And we hope that you will join us for future Lifetime Learning programs. To find out about our programming, please visit our website at engagement.virginia.edu/learn. When you get to our website, you can check out future Lifetime Learning programs, the vodcast library, our Thoughts from the Lawn blogs, and our UVA Speaks podcast series to read, watch, and listen to our expert UVA faculty. So thank you again for joining us for this hour of learning, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your afternoon and evening. Thank you.